cowboy promised he'd marry the Apache girl who saved him. Years later, she returned for him. The sun set slowly over the rugged hills of the frontier, casting long shadows across the dry, cracked earth. The wind howled in the distance, kicking up the dust and stirring the endless desert. It was a hard land, unforgiving and wild. Few could survive here for long, and even fewer thrived. But Sam Cole was one of those who did. A cowboy at heart, Sam had spent his life riding across the vast wasteland, earning his keep with his gun and his wits. His name was known in every dusty town and saloon, from the edge of the desert to the newly built spaceports far beyond. He didn't belong to any one place, and he didn't answer to anyone. He had nothing left but his horse, his gear, and the open road. And he thought maybe that was enough. But even the most hardened men can be brought low. That night he was caught off guard. 3 men ambushed him on the edge of a narrow canyon, their shadows stretching long under the pale light of the moon. Sam had made enemies, but he hadn't thought any of them would take him down like this. They attacked from all sides, and before Sam could even reach for his gun, they had him on the ground, beating him into the dirt. The world spun in a haze of pain. His vision blurred as the men took his money, his gear, and left him for dead. His body ached, and his breath came in shallow, painful gasps. They didn't even bother to finish the job. They left him, alone and dying, beneath the stars. A soft sound reached his ears, barely a whisper against the desert wind, like the flutter of a bird's wings. At first he thought it was a dream, the heat and blood loss making his mind clouded and slow. But then he heard her voice, a soft, melodic voice that seemed to carry with it the ancient songs of her people.
"Stay still," she said, kneeling beside him.
He could barely make out her form in the darkness, but he knew immediately who she was. Apache. She was a girl, young and strong, with long dark hair tied back in the traditional style of her tribe. Her clothes were simple but functional, the earthy browns and reds blending with the landscape. She was an Apache warrior, but there was something in her eyes that told Sam she was no ordinary fighter. She had the calm confidence of someone who had seen the worst the world had to offer and still stood tall. She worked quickly, her hands gentle but firm as she cleaned his wounds, applying herbs and salves that Sam couldn't even name. Through the haze of his pain, Sam tried to focus on her, tried to understand how she had come to be here. How had she found him, miles from any settlement? "I'll save you," she said simply, her voice low and steady. "But you must promise me something." Sam, barely able to keep his eyes open, nodded slowly, his lips cracked and dry. He didn't have the strength to speak, but somehow he understood. "What?" he rasped. "You will marry me," she said, her voice softer now, as though it were a secret only meant for him. "One day you will come back for me. I will wait."
The words were strange to Sam.
A promise? He barely knew this girl. He wasn't sure if he would even survive the night, let alone keep any promises. But somehow the words felt right. Maybe it was the way she spoke. Calm, unwavering, like she had already seen the future and knew what it would bring. Or maybe it was the connection between them, something deeper than words, something that ran through their blood like the wind across the plains. "I promise," Sam whispered, his voice hoarse and broken. She smiled, a small, soft curve of her lips. Then she reached out, her fingers brushing his forehead like a blessing. Sam felt his pain begin to fade, slowly, as though the warmth of her touch was healing him. "Rest," she said. "I will watch over you." The night passed slowly. Sam's body healed, and his mind drifted in and out of unconsciousness. The Apache girl never left his side, tending to his wounds, bringing him water, and keeping watch over the desert. When he woke the next morning, the sun had already risen high in the sky. The heat of the day was beginning to set in, but the girl was gone. She had vanished into the desert like a ghost, leaving behind no trace of her presence. Her promise echoed in Sam's mind like a bell tolling in the distance, a sound that would stay with him for years to come. For a long time, Sam lay in the dirt, staring at the endless sky above. He thought about the promise he had made and what it meant. He had always been a man of his word. He didn't make promises lightly. But this promise, it seemed different. He wasn't sure why. All he knew was that he would never forget the Apache girl who had saved his life. And in the quiet moments when he was alone, deep in the heart of the wilderness, he would hear her voice again, soft and steady in his memory. "You will come back for me." Years passed quickly, as they often do when you're chasing the wind. Sam Cole had spent much of his life in the dusty frontier towns. drifting from place to place. Time had a way of slipping by unnoticed in the harsh, unforgiving landscape. The land was changing, but so was Sam. The days were long, filled with dust, and the nights colder than ever. He kept his promise to himself, not to forget. But even promises, once made, can fade with the years, no matter how strong the memory is. He had tried to put her out of his mind, tried to live the life he knew best, riding alone, working as a hired hand for whoever paid. It wasn't much of a life, but it was the only one he knew. And then, one evening, everything changed. Sam had been working a job near one of the newer settlements on the outskirts of the frontier. A rough place, barely more than a trading post with a few buildings and a spaceport for those brave enough or foolish enough to trust the frontier's unpredictable paths. The settlers were a mixture of newcomers from the outer planets and old-timers who had come seeking fortune. Among them were traders, soldiers, and those who lived in the shadows, doing business of a more questionable nature. Sam had spent weeks in this place, helping out when necessary, but mostly keeping to himself, just the way he liked it. He was sitting at a table in the local saloon, nursing a drink and listening to the hum of conversation around him, when something made him look up. A woman had walked into the room. At first glance, she didn't seem like anything out of the ordinary. She was dressed in the rough clothes of a traveler, worn and dusty from the road. But there was something about the way she carried herself. She moved with the confidence of someone who had seen more of the world than most could ever imagine. The saloon seemed to quiet as she passed through the door, her presence commanding attention. Sam's heart skipped a beat. She was familiar. At first, he thought it was just his mind playing tricks on him. It had been so many years since he had last seen her, and she had been so young, so wild. But now, standing before him, was a woman who had a quiet strength in her eyes, a fire that burned as brightly as the desert sun. Her hair, still dark and long, was braided down her back, and her face held the weight of someone who had endured hardship and come out stronger. Tala. His throat tightened and his mind raced. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected to see her ever again. And yet here she was. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, the rest of the room seemed to disappear. There was no noise, no movement. Just her and him. The years that had passed felt like nothing in the face of what they had once shared. But the connection between them was different now, strained, like an old rope that had been pulled too tight. She didn't need to. Sam could see the strength in her, strength he hadn't noticed when she saved his life. She was no longer the girl who had offered a promise in the desert. She was a woman, hardened by time and by the world. After what seemed like an eternity, Tala spoke. "Sam Cole," she said, her voice low and steady. "I knew you'd be here." Sam stood up slowly, unsure of what to say. His mind felt foggy, as though he had forgotten how to speak. The memories came flooding back. Her hands, her voice, the promise he had made to her. But those memories were now shadows, and he was no longer the man he had been. I didn't think I'd see you again," Sam said, his voice rough. He cleared his throat, his words stumbling. "It's been a long time, Tala." Her expression softened, but only for a moment. She wasn't here for small talk. Sam could feel that. "I've come for what you promised," she said quietly. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. "I told you I would come back for you," Sam whispered, more to himself than to her. He had promised, and now here she was, asking him to keep it. But years had passed. He had lived a life without her, one where he was alone but free. He had made choices that had nothing to do with her. He had never really thought about the promise, never truly believed she would come back for him. And now, as she stood in front of him, he wasn't sure if he could fulfill that promise. Tala's eyes locked onto his, her gaze unwavering. "You promised," she said, and there was no anger in her voice, no bitterness. It was a simple statement, a reminder of something that had been set long ago. She wasn't angry with him, but she wasn't going to let him forget. "I know," Sam replied, his heart heavy, "but things have changed." "I've changed." Tala didn't react. She simply nodded, as though she had expected that answer. But then she stepped closer, and Sam could see the weight in her eyes. This wasn't about love anymore. It was about something deeper, something that had to do with her people, with her tribe. "You aren't the only one who's changed," Tala said softly. "The world is different now. Things are happening, Sam. There are forces out there that are threatening my people. I need your help." This wasn't what he had expected. He thought she was here for him, for what they had once shared. But now it seemed she had come for something else. "What kind of help?" Sam asked, his voice low. "There's a war coming," Tala replied, "and it's going to take more than just my people to survive it." He had never been a man of war, and he had no interest in getting involved in anyone else's battles. He'd seen enough bloodshed in his life to last a lifetime. But Tala's eyes were pleading with him, and he couldn't ignore the weight of the promise he had made so long ago. "I didn't come to ask for a soldier," Tala continued. "I came for the man who saved me in the desert, the man who promised me something." For the first time in years, Sam felt a stirring deep inside him. It wasn't a feeling of love or longing. It was a sense of duty, something he hadn't felt in a long time. He owed her. He owed her his life. And now, she was asking for his help. "All right," Sam said, his voice steady. "What do you need from me?" The wind carried a chill as Sam stood at the edge of the settlement, staring out at the vast plains stretching out before him. The dusty ground, once familiar and welcoming, now seemed more hostile than ever. He had been away from this life for so long that it felt almost like stepping into a dream, one that was half forgotten and hard to hold on to. Tala had been clear about the situation. There were forces coming, forces that would threaten not only her people, but also the fragile peace of the frontier. Her tribe, the Apache, had managed to survive on their terms for centuries, but now, with the expansion of the settlements, new threats had emerged. It wasn't just the lawless criminals Sam had known for years. It was something far worse. The corporations, the military, and even the government were setting their sights on the land Tala's people had called home. The rich minerals beneath the earth, the untouched resources of the wild plains, they were all too valuable for the newcomers to ignore. And for the first time, Tala had come to Sam not for a promise of love, but for something bigger. Something that could change everything. "You're not the man I remember, Sam," Tala had said when they met earlier. "But that doesn't matter. What matters is that you're the man I need right now." Sam wasn't sure what had changed in him over the years, but he knew she was right. The man he had been, a loner, a drifter, wasn't who he was anymore. He'd gotten used to being alone, to not caring about the struggles of the world around him. But Tala's words had struck a chord deep within him, and he couldn't ignore the pull of the promise he had made so many years ago. "I never wanted to be part of someone else's war," Sam muttered under his breath, his eyes scanning the horizon. But deep down, he knew he couldn't walk away. Not again. Not when Tala needed him. She was counting on him, just like she had all those years ago. When she had saved him from certain death in the desert, he hadn't realized how much he owed her, how much she had given him. She had given him a second chance at life, a chance to live with purpose again. And now she was asking him to help her fight for her people's survival. He took a deep breath and turned back toward the settlement. Tala was waiting for him in the small camp just outside the town, her presence calm and steady. Even with all that was at stake, she remained unshaken, like the land itself. Sam had spent the night thinking about what she had said. He had known battles before. He had fought in skirmishes, made enemies, and survived in the toughest conditions. But this was different. This wasn't just about survival. This was about fighting for something that mattered. Tala's people, the Apache, had always stood their ground, but now they were outnumbered. And Sam knew that if he didn't help, there would be no one left to protect the land they had fought so hard to hold on to. As he approached the camp, he saw Tala standing by the fire, her silhouette framed by the flickering light. She didn't look up when he came closer. She didn't need to. "You came," she said softly, her voice steady and unwavering. Sam stopped just in front of her, the weight of his decision settling in his chest. "I couldn't walk away again," he said, his voice low. "What do we need to do?" Her eyes, sharp and focused, held his gaze. "We need to unite the tribes," she said simply. "The others need to see that we are stronger together. Alone, we're just targets. Together, we can fight." Sam nodded slowly. The plan was clear. There were other Apache tribes scattered across the land, each with their own customs and leaders. They had always been independent, but Tala believed that they had to come together if they stood any chance against the forces closing in on them. "Where do we start?" Sam asked, ready to follow her lead. "We go to them," Tala replied, "and we show them what we're capable of." For the next few days, Sam and Tala traveled across the desert, visiting each of the Apache leaders. It wasn't easy. Some were reluctant to join forces, their pride keeping them from seeing the bigger picture. But Tala's words were powerful, and Sam's presence added weight to her plea. As they journeyed from one tribe to the next, Sam couldn't help but notice how much Tala had changed. She was no longer the quiet girl he had once known. She had become a leader, someone others respected and followed. It wasn't long before Sam began to see the truth in her words. The tribes, though independent, shared a common bond. They all carried the same blood, the same land, the same struggles. And while they had fought against each other in the past, they were all facing the same threat now. By the time they reached the final tribe, Sam had seen firsthand the toll the years had taken on the Apache people. The land that had once been their sanctuary was now a battleground, with outsiders pushing in from all sides. But there was still hope. Tala had united them. Sam had watched as the different tribes, once divided by pride and history, came together for the greater good. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. As they gathered around the campfire that night, Sam stood beside Tala. The firelight danced in her eyes, and for a moment he could see the girl she had been. But she was no longer that girl. She was a warrior, a leader, and maybe, just maybe, she had always been that way. "We fight tomorrow," Tala said, her voice steady. "We fight for our people, for our land, for everything that we've lost, and when it's over, we will decide what comes next." Sam didn't speak. He didn't need to. He knew what was at stake now. It wasn't just about survival. It was about preserving something greater than himself. And for the first time in a long while, Sam Cole felt like he was part of something that truly mattered. The night before the battle, the air was still, the stars hanging high above, like distant eyes watching the earth below. The Apache camp was quiet, save for the low murmur of voices and the crackling of the fire. Sam sat near the flames, his mind lost in thought. The weight of the coming fight pressed on him. He had fought in battles before, but this felt different. There was no running away from this one, no more wandering the desert. This time, they were standing together, united in a cause. Tala moved quietly through the camp, her presence commanding but peaceful. She had become the heart of this gathering, the force that brought these tribes together. Her people had followed her not because she was the strongest or the most powerful, but because they believed in her vision. They believed in what she was fighting for. Sam watched her as she approached him. Her eyes, sharp and unyielding, met his, and for a moment, the world around them seemed to fall away. It was just the two of them, alone in the quiet of the night, with only the fire between them. "You ready, aren't you?" Tala asked, her voice soft but steady. It wasn't a question for reassurance, it was a statement of fact. She knew him better than anyone else, perhaps better than he knew himself. Sam nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the fire. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready for this," he said, his voice low, "but I know it's something that needs to be done. I can't turn my back on it. Not again." Tala crouched down beside him, her expression softening. She placed a hand on his arm, the warmth of her touch grounding him. "You've never turned your back on what's right, Sam. You've always done what you thought was best. And now, you're doing it again." He turned to look at her then, his heart heavy with the weight of the moment. There were so many things he wanted to say, so many thoughts racing through his mind, but none of them seemed to matter. What mattered was that they were here, together, standing for something greater than themselves. "I'm not the man I was when I first met you," Sam said quietly. "I'm not sure if I'm a better man, but I'm a different one, and that's something." Tala smiled, a small, knowing smile. That's all anyone can ask for. They sat in silence for a while longer, the crackling fire the only sound between them. Sam knew that the morning would come quickly, and with it, the battle. There was no turning back, but in this moment, with Tala by his side, he felt a sense of peace. For the first time in years, he felt like he was part of something important, something worth fighting for. The first light of dawn broke over the horizon, casting a pale glow across the desert. The camp was awake, the Apache warriors moving quietly as they prepared for the fight that would determine the fate of their people. Sam stood with the others, his rifle in hand, his eyes scanning the horizon. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew he had to fight for it. Tala stood beside him, her face calm, her eyes focused. She had become the leader of this movement, but she had never let it change who she was. She was still the girl who had saved him all those years ago, the girl who had promised him something, and who now stood by his side, ready to fight. "We don't fight for victory," Tala said, her voice carrying across the camp. "We fight for survival. We fight for our future, and we fight together." The words rang in the air like a rallying cry, and Sam felt the fire of determination stir inside him. He wasn't fighting for glory or for recognition. He was fighting because it was the right thing to do. He was fighting because, for the first time in a long time, he had something worth fighting for. The battle was fierce. The enemy came in waves, a mix of soldiers, mercenaries, and corporate security forces. They had underestimated the Apache. They had thought they could simply push them aside, take their land, and move on, but they had underestimated the strength of the Apache spirit, the bond that tied the people together, and they had underestimated Tala. Sam fought alongside the others, his rifle steady in his hands. He moved with purpose, covering his brothers and sisters, protecting those who fought beside him. Every shot he took felt like a step toward redemption. He wasn't just fighting for survival, he was fighting for the future. He was fighting for Tala. As the battle raged on, Sam found himself beside her again, just as he had been years ago, in the thick of the fight. Tala was at the front, her blade flashing in the sunlight as she led the charge. She was unstoppable, her presence a force that commanded respect. Sam watched her for a moment, amazed at how far she had come. She had become everything she had promised to be, and more. But the battle wasn't over. The enemy wasn't giving up easily, and the fight continued into the afternoon. Sam could feel the exhaustion setting in, the weight of the fight pressing on him. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. There was too much at stake. They couldn't afford to lose now. Finally, as the sun began to set, the last of the enemy forces began to retreat. The Apache had won. The tribes had fought together, and they had secured their future. Sam stood in the middle of the battlefield, his heart pounding in his chest, his body sore from the fight. But there was no time to rest. The fight was over, but the real work was just beginning. Tala walked toward him, her face streaked with dirt, her eyes fierce and determined. She smiled at him, the same smile that had once made Sam promise to come back for her, the same smile that had saved his life all those years ago. "We did it," she said, her voice quiet but full of pride. Sam nodded, his breath coming in slow, steady gasps. "Yeah," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We did." For the first time in a long time, Sam felt at peace. The promise he had made to Tala had been kept, and though the world around them was far from perfect, Sam knew one thing for certain. They had fought for what was right, and they had won. Together.